The morning air carried an unusual crispness for late September as 23 art students from the Arcadia Institute gathered on the granite steps of the Metropolitan Museum of Modern Art. Professor Eleanor Voss checked her watch impatiently, her silver bangles clinking against each other as she counted heads for the third time. 23, all accounted for. "Remember," she called out over the excited chatter, "this isn't just another field trip. The Obscura Exhibition only comes to the States once a decade. What you'll see today will challenge everything you think you know about perspective and light." Among the students, Maya Chen adjusted her camera strap, her fingers already itching to capture the masterpieces waiting inside. Beside her, Daniel Whitaker scribbled frantically in his sketchbook, trying to capture the building's imposing architecture before they entered. "You think they'll let us get close enough to see the brushwork?" Maya asked, her voice betraying her excitement. Daniel looked up, a strand of dark hair falling across his eyes. "The real question is whether they'll kick us out when I try to touch one." They laughed, unaware that security cameras were already tracking their movements, cataloguing their faces, their voices. Inside, the museum's cavernous atrium swallowed them whole. Professor Voss distributed the passes that would grant them access to the special exhibition hidden in the museum's west wing. "Stay together," she instructed. "Meet back here at 4. Anyone not present will be left behind." Her attempt at humor fell flat in the echoing space. The students dispersed in small clusters, gravitating toward different galleries. Maya and Daniel, inseparable since freshman year, drifted toward the Obscura Exhibition with 4 other students from their advanced composition class. The 6 of them moved together through the main galleries, past centuries of artistic evolution toward the temporary exhibition that had drawn critics and art lovers from across the globe. The entrance to the Obscura Exhibition was marked by heavy black curtains and a sign warning about the disorienting nature of the installations inside. A security guard checked their passes with unusual scrutiny before letting them through. "Did you see how he looked at us?" whispered Eliza, another student in their group, "like he was memorizing our faces. Probably making sure we don't smuggle out any priceless artifacts in our backpacks," Daniel joked, but something in the guard's expression had unsettled him too. Inside, the exhibition was a labyrinth of darkened rooms. Each installation played with perception in ways that left visitors questioning their own senses. Black walls absorbed what little light existed, creating the illusion of infinite space. Projections twisted familiar objects into unrecognizable forms. Sound installations manipulated acoustic waves until conversation became nearly impossible. Maya lost herself in photographing a piece that used mirrors and light to create the illusion of people trapped inside glass prisms. "This is incredible," she breathed, adjusting her aperture to capture the effect. Daniel had wandered to the next room, drawn by an installation that seemed to bend space itself. The placard beside it read only, "The Threshold, Artist Unknown." By mid-afternoon, the group had fragmented further. Maya and Daniel found themselves alone in a room at the exhibition's heart. Unlike the others, this space was unnervingly quiet, containing only a single painting that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "I don't remember this on the exhibition map," Maya said, approaching the canvas cautiously. The painting depicted what appeared to be a doorway, rendered with such precision that it seemed to recede into actual depth. Daniel checked the time. "We should head back. It's almost 4. But Maya stepped closer, fascinated by the technique. "One more photo," she insisted, raising her camera. The security camera in the corner of the room recorded Maya adjusting her lens, Daniel glancing at his watch again. It captured Maya lowering her camera suddenly, her expression changing from concentration to confusion. It recorded Daniel moving to her side, his hand reaching for her arm, and then, inexplicably, the footage showed only an empty room. At 4 o'clock, Professor Voss counted heads again on the museum steps. 21. She frowned, checking her list. Has anyone seen Maya or Daniel? The other students exchanged glances, shrugged. They had separated hours ago, lost in the exhibition's maze. They probably lost track of time, someone suggested. You know how they get around new techniques. Professor Voss nodded, but something like apprehension settled in her stomach. She decided to give them 15 more minutes before notifying security. Inside the museum, in a darkened exhibition room, the painting of the doorway hung silently on the wall. The security camera continued its steady surveillance of an empty space, no trace remaining of the two students who had stood there just moments before. Professor Voss paced the security office, her bracelets jangling with each agitated step. The exhibition had closed 30 minutes ago, and still no sign of Maya or Daniel. We've searched every gallery, restroom, and cafe, said the head of security, a man named Garrison with military posture and watchful eyes. No one matching their description remains in the building. They wouldn't just leave, Voss insisted. They're responsible students. Maya was supposed to present her portfolio critique tomorrow. Garrison replayed the security footage, tracking the students' movements until they entered the final room of the Obscura Exhibition. The strange gap in the footage, showing them one moment, an empty room the next, he attributed to a technical glitch. Equipment malfunction happens sometimes with the lighting in that exhibition. By nightfall, neither student had returned to campus. Professor Voss called both their cell phones repeatedly, each attempt going straight to voicemail. At 9 p.m., she notified campus security, who suggested the students might have extended their museum visit into an impromptu night out in the city. They're adults, Professor. Maybe they decided to grab dinner, see a show. Give it until morning. But morning came with no messages, no explanations. No one had heard from either student. Detective Luis Rivera arrived at the Arcadia Institute by noon the following day, notebook in hand, expression betraying nothing as Professor Voss led him to Maya's dorm room. The resident advisor unlocked the door with shaking hands. Inside, the room was a perfect snapshot of interrupted life. A half-empty coffee mug sat on the desk beside an open laptop. A drying rack held delicate negatives from Maya's latest photography project. Her bed was unmade, a cardigan tossed carelessly across the rumpled sheets. She was rushing yesterday morning, said her roommate Tasha, hovering in the doorway. Spilled coffee on her shirt, had to change at the last minute. She was excited about the exhibition, said it might influence her thesis project. Rivera moved carefully through the space, noting the personal touches that revealed Maya's life. Family photos taped to the mirror, a calendar meticulously marked with assignment deadlines, a row of expensive camera lenses arranged by focal length. On the shelf. Anything missing? He asked. Passport, extra clothes, toiletry bag? Tasha shook her head. Everything's here. Even her favorite camera, the one that belonged to her grandfather. She never goes anywhere without it. And she didn't mention plans to go anywhere after the museum? No. She was supposed to help me with my composition assignment last night. Daniel's room told a similar story. His sketchbooks were stacked on his desk, the top one open to a half-finished drawing. His laptop contained research for a paper due next week. His medication for chronic migraines sat in its weekly organizer, yesterday's compartment still full. His roommate, Eric, appeared genuinely baffled. We were supposed to meet for dinner at the dining hall. He texted around noon saying he'd see me at 7. That was the last I heard from him. Rivera examined Daniel's phone records. The last text had indeed been sent to Eric at 12:17 p.m. from a location consistent with the museum. Then nothing. Back in his office, Rivera created 2 case files. He placed their student ID photos on top. Maya with her confident smile, camera always in hand. Daniel with thoughtful eyes and perpetually paint-stained fingers. Below, he methodically listed the facts. 2 art students, close friends, last seen at a prestigious museum during a class field trip. No history of disappearances, no apparent reason to vanish, no signs of preparation for departure. Their bank accounts showed no activity. After the morning of the disappearance, their social media accounts remained dormant. Their families, now frantic with worry, reported no unusual conversations or behaviors in the days before. "It's like they just evaporated," Rivera murmured to his partner. At the museum, security staff reviewed footage again, finding nothing new. The exhibition continued as planned, crowds flowing through the same spaces where Maya and Daniel had disappeared, oblivious to the mystery unfolding around them. In the dormitory, Maya's film slowly dried on the rack, images she would never develop. Daniel's medication remained in its organizer, Thursday's dose untaken, then Fridays, then Saturdays. Yellow police tape appeared across their doors. Flyers, with their faces materialized on campus bulletin boards, then throughout the city. Their phones remained silent in evidence bags, batteries now dead. 2 empty dorm rooms, preserved like exhibits themselves. 2 lives interrupted mid-sentence. And at the museum, the exhibition continued for another week before moving to its next international destination, taking whatever secrets it held along with it. Detective Rivera sat alone in the darkened room, the blue glow of multiple screens casting harsh shadows across his face. For the 37th time in 3 days, he rewound the museum security footage to the moment before Maya Chen and Daniel Whitaker vanished. "What am I missing?" he muttered, leaning forward as the video played once more. The timestamp showed 3:42 p.m. Maya adjusted her camera settings, framing a shot of the unusual painting. Daniel checked his watch, said something to her. She lowered her camera, her expression changing subtly. Rivera paused the video, studying her face. Confusion, recognition, fear. He couldn't quite place it. He continued the playback. Daniel stepped closer to Maya, reaching for her arm. And then, nothing. An empty room. The timestamp continued, running without interruption. No glitch, no jump cut, no distortion. Just 2 people there one moment, gone the next. "Impossible," he whispered, but the evidence remained stubbornly in front of him. A soft knock at the door broke his concentration. Tamara Wilson, the museum's head of security, entered with a cardboard tray holding 2 coffees. "Thought you could use this," she said, placing 1 cup beside him. "Any progress?" Rivera sighed, rubbing his eyes. "Something's not right with this footage. I told you, our systems are state-of-the-art. No tampering possible." "I'm not suggesting tampering, I'm suggesting—" He trailed off, unsure how to articulate what he was thinking without sounding delusional. How could 2 adults simply disappear from a crowded museum without anyone noticing? "Show me everything," he said finally. "Every angle, every camera, the entire day." Hours blurred together as they reviewed more footage. Rivera watched Maya and Daniel arrive with their classmates, saw them separate from the group, tracked them through various galleries until they entered the Obscura Exhibition. "There," Rivera pointed. "Camera 43, the entrance to the exhibition. Time them for me." Tamara checked her notes. They entered at 1:17 p.m. and disappeared at 3:42 p.m. That's nearly 2.5 hours inside. "It's an immersive exhibition. People spend time with each installation." "But look at their classmates," Rivera said, pulling up another feed. "The longest any others spent inside was 90 minutes. A pattern began to emerge. The exhibition contained 14 rooms. Most visitors progressed through them sequentially, spending roughly equal time in each. But the footage showed Maya and Daniel lingering in certain rooms, particularly those featuring installations about dimensional perception. Can you show me the specific room where they disappeared? Rivera asked. From the beginning of the day. The footage revealed something curious. Throughout the day, visitors would enter the room, view the painting, and leave. Average time spent, 2 minutes. But 3 other visitors had paused in exactly the same spot where Maya and Daniel had stood. Each time, the camera showed them approaching the painting, then inexplicably shifting position several feet away in the next frame, as if teleported. Equipment malfunction, Tamara suggested weakly. Rivera shook his head. Too consistent. Same. Painting. Same spot, same anomaly. He requested maintenance records for the camera. No issues reported, no repairs needed. The footage itself showed no signs of tampering or degradation. As dawn approached, Rivera had another thought. Show me the night before they disappeared. The late-night footage showed an empty exhibition, closed to the public. At 2:14 a.m., a lone figure entered the room. A man in the uniform of the museum's installation team. He approached the painting, adjusted its position slightly, then appeared to press something on its frame. The camera's view wavered momentarily, a nearly imperceptible flicker. "Who is that?" Rivera demanded. Tamara accessed the employee database. Thomas Graft, contracted for the Obscura installation, his credentials checked out. "I need to speak with him." Tamara's face fell. "That's impossible." He completed his contract and left after the exhibition opened. No forwarding address. The contact information on his application. "We've tried. The number's disconnected. The address doesn't exist." Rivera turned back to the screens, to the frozen image of Maya and Daniel in their final recorded moment. Something about the painting drew his attention. Its perfect perspective, creating an illusion of depth so convincing it seemed one could step through it. "The exhibition," he said suddenly. "Where did it go next?" "Berlin," Tamara replied. "It left 3 days after the disappearance." Outside, the first light of dawn broke over the city. In the blue-tinted darkness of the security room, Rivera stared at the impossible footage, at the painting that seemed more portal than artwork, and felt the first cold tremor of understanding. The basement archive of the police department smelled of dust and forgotten promises. Detective Luis Rivera ran his finger along the cardboard boxes stacked on metal shelves, stopping at a box marked Chen Whitaker, 2009. 16 years had passed, yet he still remembered the weight of the case, as if he'd just set it down yesterday. Rivera pulled the box from the shelf, disturbing a layer of dust that danced in the sickly fluorescent light. His new partner, Detective Sophia Morgan, watched from the doorway. "You're really doing this?" she asked, skepticism evident in her voice. "Reopening a 16-year-old cold case when we've got 3 fresh homicides on our desks?" Rivera didn't look up as he placed the box on a battered metal table. "I never closed it," he said simply. Inside the box lay the physical remnants of 2 interrupted lives. Maya's camera, found in her dorm room, Daniel's sketchbook, interview transcripts, museum blueprints, photographs of their families, holding candles at vigils that grew smaller each year. "The department wants me to retire next month," Rivera said, carefully laying out the evidence files. 30 years of service. Time to fish, play with grandkids I don't have." Morgan stepped into the room, curious despite herself. "And you can't let this one go. 2 promising young artists walk into a museum and never walk out. No bodies, no evidence of foul play, no motive, no suspects, just gone." Rivera's voice hardened. "Every detective has their white whale. This is mine." The file contained hundreds of interview transcripts, museum staff, students, professors, family members, all leading nowhere. Reports of similar disappearances Rivera had investigated over the years, none with the same clean, vanishing act. International inquiries that had been met with polite dismissals. "Captain thinks I'm obsessed," Rivera admitted, examining a map of the museum with sections highlighted and annotated in his increasingly desperate handwriting. "Maybe I am." "Why these two?" Morgan asked, lifting Maya's student ID photo. "Why this case?" Rivera was silent for a moment. "My daughter would have been their age." Morgan knew about Rivera's daughter, who had died of leukemia at 8. It explained much about his dogged persistence, his refusal to let go of missing persons cases that others abandoned. "I promised their parents," he added more quietly. "I'm not breaking that promise just because the department wants to clear unsolved cases off the books." The timeline Rivera had constructed covered one wall of the archive room. Photographs, notes, and red string connecting events formed a web of investigation that spanned years. The museum exhibition had traveled to 7 countries after the disappearance. Rivera had tracked it to each location, finding dead ends at every turn. "The painting," Rivera said, pulling out a photograph, "the one they were last seen standing in front of. It disappeared too." "What do you mean?" "When the exhibition was inventoried in Berlin, that specific piece wasn't included. The curator claimed it was never part of the collection. But I have the original catalogue photos from visitors. It existed." Morgan studied the photograph. A simple doorway painted with unsettling realism against a black background. "What was it called?" "The Threshold by Artist Unknown. I've searched every art database. Nothing." Rivera opened his laptop, showing Morgan footage he'd obtained from other museums where the Obscura Exhibition had traveled. In 3 separate instances, security cameras had captured similar anomalies. Visitors approaching certain installations, then appearing to glitch or jump position. "No disappearances, though," Morgan noted. "No, but something's happening in these exhibits, something no one wants to acknowledge." A notification pinged on Rivera's phone. He checked it, his expression darkening. "The exhibition is coming back," he said. "After 16 years, the Obscura collection is returning to the city next month. New pieces, new artists, same curator." Morgan watched understanding dawn on her partner's face. "This is why you're reopening the case now?" Rivera nodded slowly. "It's no coincidence. The exhibition returns, and suddenly an anonymous tip appears in my inbox. Coordinates to a storage facility on the outskirts of town, with a claim that answers about the missing students can be found there. Could be nothing. Could be a cruel prank." Rivera closed the box carefully, reverently. "Or it could be the break I've been waiting 16 years for." The fluorescent lights flickered overhead as Rivera gathered his files. In the shadows of the archive room, the faces of Maya Chen and Daniel Whitaker stared out from their photographs, forever frozen at 21, waiting for someone to uncover what had really happened on that September afternoon 16 years ago. Emma Matthews stood in the cavernous main gallery of the Metropolitan Museum of Modern Art, her footsteps echoing off the marble floors. At 34, she was the youngest head curator in the museum's history, a fact that had made the New York art world buzz with both admiration and skepticism when her appointment was announced 3 weeks ago. "The board is impressed with your vision for the upcoming season," Director Hargrove said, his voice carrying in the empty space. "The museum wouldn't open to the public for another hour. Particularly your proposal for the Contemporary Voices exhibition." Emma nodded, trying to mask her nervousness behind professional composure. "I believe in showcasing new perspectives alongside established masters. Art should challenge as much as it comforts." "Indeed," Hargrove agreed, though something in his tone suggested reservation. "There is, however, another exhibition we'd like you to oversee, a returning collection that requires Special attention. He handed her a sleek black portfolio. The cover bore a single word in silver lettering, Obscura. The Obscura Exhibition. Emma couldn't hide her surprise. I thought that was just a rumor. It hasn't been shown in North America for years. 16 years, to be precise, Hargrove said. Its return is quite a coup for the museum. The collection has been significantly expanded since its last appearance here. Emma opened the portfolio, revealing photographs of installations that played with perception in ways that made her eyes strain to understand what she was seeing. Optical illusions, dimensional distortions, light and shadow manipulated to create impossible spaces. "These are remarkable," she murmured, turning pages filled with works that existed at the intersection of art and physics. "Why me? Surely there are curators with more experience." "The Obscura requires fresh eyes," Hargrove interrupted. "Someone who won't be influenced by its previous showing." Something in his choice of words struck Emma as odd. Influenced? Hargrove's smile tightened. Biased by preconceptions, the last curator who managed the exhibition left the museum shortly after. Nervous breakdown, apparently. Emma continued through the portfolio, stopping at a page detailing the exhibition's controversial history. "There were disappearances associated with the last showing," she read aloud. "2 art students." "An unfortunate coincidence," Hargrove said dismissively. "They left the museum safely. What happened after was unrelated to the exhibition." But Emma had already found the police report summary. They were last seen inside the exhibition. The security footage is 16 years old and inconclusive, Hargrove cut in, his tone hardening. "Ms. Matthews, this exhibition represents a significant opportunity for the museum and for your career. I would hope your academic interest in art history doesn't extend to indulging in urban legends." Emma closed the portfolio, sensing the unspoken warning in his words. "When does the collection arrive?" "The first pieces are being delivered tonight. You'll have 3 weeks to prepare for the opening." Hargrove checked his watch. "The installation team has been pre-selected. They've worked with Obscura before and understand its unique requirements." As if on cue, Emma's phone buzzed, with an email containing security clearances, access codes, and a list of strict protocols for handling the Obscura pieces. "One more thing," Hargrove added, already turning to leave. "The exhibition includes several new acquisitions that aren't in that portfolio. The artist prefers to maintain an element of surprise." "The artist? I thought Obscura was a collection from multiple creators." "Most pieces, yes, but the central works come from a single source who prefers anonymity. You'll be dealing primarily with their representative, Dr. Elias Thorne. He'll be arriving tomorrow to oversee the installation of the more, sensitive pieces." After Hargrove left, Emma remained in the empty gallery, the Obscura portfolio heavy in her hands. Her research fellowship at the Curator Institute had focused on the relationship between art and perception, but nothing in her academic background had prepared her for this. Curious, she took out her phone and searched Obscura Exhibition, disappearances. Thousands of results appeared, conspiracy theories, paranormal explanations, and one persistent detective who refused to close the case even after 16 years. Emma closed the browser, unsettled. The museum would be opening soon, visitors flooding the galleries, unaware of what would soon occupy the West Wing. She tucked the portfolio under her arm and headed toward her office, already making mental notes for her own investigation into the exhibition's troubled history and the 2 students who never made it home. Emma's heels clicked across the polished concrete floor of the West Wing as she supervised the renovation crew. 3 days, had passed since her meeting with Hargrove, and the space was being transformed to accommodate the Obscura Exhibition's specific requirements. "The lighting system needs to be completely reconfigured," she instructed the head technician. "According to these specs, each installation requires precise illumination calibration." The technician nodded, studying the unusual diagrams. "Never seen anything like this before. These aren't standard lumens or color temperatures." "The exhibition plays with perception," Emma explained. "Light is as much a medium as the physical installations." As the crew worked on the ceiling grid, Emma moved through the space, trying to envision how visitors would experience each installation. The layout was deliberately disorienting, paths that seemed to loop back on themselves, sight lines, obscured by strategic partitions. "Ms. Matthews," a worker's voice echoed from across the room, "we've found something odd in the north wall." Emma crossed to where a section of drywall had been removed to access electrical panels. The worker pointed to a small aperture revealed behind the wall. "Looks like an old viewing port," he said, "but it's not on any of the building plans." Emma peered through the opening. Beyond was darkness, but she could make out the suggestion of a narrow corridor. "How long has this been here?" The worker shrugged. "Building's over a century old. Lots of renovations over the years. Things get covered up, forgotten." Something about the discovery unsettled Emma. She made a note to investigate further, then continued her rounds. Near the proposed location, for the exhibition's centerpiece, she noticed another anomaly. The floor plan showed the room as a perfect square, but her measurements revealed it was slightly trapezoidal, with one wall at a subtle angle. "Is there a reason for this discrepancy?" she asked the project manager, showing him her findings. He glanced at the blueprints. "Probably just an old building settling. These places shift over decades." But Emma wasn't convinced. That evening, after the crews had left, she returned to the West Wing alone. The silence was heavy, punctuated only by the occasional settling of the old building. With a flashlight, she examined the areas that had caught her attention during the day. The viewing port in the north wall was small, perhaps 4 inches in diameter, and positioned at eye level. Emma shone her light through it again, revealing what appeared to be a service corridor. But why would anyone need to observe the gallery space secretly? Moving to the trapezoidal room, she ran her hand along the angled wall, feeling for inconsistencies. Near the floor, her fingers detected a slight draft. Kneeling, she discovered a nearly invisible seam where the baseboard met the wall. Her phone buzzed, making her jump. A text from the loading dock. "First Obscura crates arrived, awaiting your instruction." Emma pocketed her phone and gave them wall one last look. The renovation would continue tomorrow, and these architectural quirks would soon be hidden behind temporary walls and installation pieces. Perhaps they were nothing, just the ordinary secrets of an old building. At the loading dock, 5 large crates waited, each marked with the Obscura insignia and specific handling instructions. The delivery manifest listed them simply as preparatory works, threshold series. "Where would you like these, Ms. Matthews?" asked the dock manager. "The secured storage room adjacent to the conservation lab," Emma replied. "I'll examine them myself before they're unpacked." As the crates were moved, Emma noticed a tall, slender man observing from the shadows. He stepped forward when he saw her looking his direction. "Ms. Matthews, I presume?" His voice was soft, precise. "I'm Dr. Elias Thorne. I believe Director Hargrove mentioned I would be joining you." Emma hadn't expected him until tomorrow. Something about his sudden appearance, like he had materialized from the darkness itself, made her uneasy. "The main collection arrives tomorrow," Thorne continued, his pale eyes never leaving hers. "These are merely preliminary pieces to prepare the space." "Prepare it for what exactly?" Emma asked. Thorne's smile didn't reach his eyes. For the crossing, of course. He gestured toward the crates, now disappearing into the elevator. Art is a doorway, Ms. Matthews. The best works don't just invite viewers to look, they invite them to enter. Outside, the city lights glimmered against a darkening sky. Inside, the museum, shadows stretched across walls that held more secrets than Emma had yet discovered, secrets hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone to finally see them. The museum's archives occupied the third sub-basement, a windowless labyrinth of metal shelving and climate-controlled rooms. Emma signed in with the archivist, a reedy man named Winters, who regarded her with suspicion. Maintenance logs from 2009, he repeated, peering over wire-rimmed glasses. Rather specific request. Just being thorough, Emma replied, maintaining a casual tone. The West Wing renovations have revealed some structural anomalies. I want to see if they've been documented before. Winters led her through the stacks to a section containing administrative records. Building services, equipment maintenance, incident reports, they're all here. Not the most exciting reading, I'm afraid. Emma smiled. History is hidden in the mundane, Mr. Winters. After he left, Emma began examining the logs from the months surrounding the previous Obscura exhibition. Most were predictably boring. Temperature control issues, lighting replacements, plumbing repairs, but something was missing. The logs from September 2009, when the students disappeared, had been removed. Emma checked adjacent months, finding an unbroken sequence except for that crucial gap. She was about to give up when she noticed a thin folder misfiled in the neighboring section. Inside was a single maintenance request dated September 18, 2009, 2 days after the disappearance. The form was routine, a request to repair a wall in Exhibition Room 7 of the West Wing. But a handwritten note at the bottom caught her attention. Second incident this week, connected to the missing ones, needs immediate containment. The signature was illegible, but the work order had been marked completed and stamped with security clearance codes she didn't recognize. Emma photographed the document with her phone, then continued searching. In a box of miscellaneous paperwork, she discovered a water-damaged journal wedged between budget reports. The cover bore no name, but the dates inside matched the period of the first Obscura exhibition. Most entries were mundane observations from someone on the maintenance staff, complaints about overtime, notes about faulty equipment. Then on September 14th, 2 days before the students vanished, Thorne requested another adjustment to Room 7's dimensions. Third time this month, claims the angles affect resonance patterns. Whatever he's doing in there, it's changing the room somehow. Swear the measurements are different each time, even though the walls haven't moved. Harrison agrees, says he got dizzy in there yesterday, felt like the floor was tilting. Management says it's just the installation playing tricks. On our eyes, maybe, but I'm avoiding that section after hours. Emma's pulse quickened. Thorne had been involved with the previous exhibition too. The next entry, dated September 16th, was hastily scrawled. Something happened today. Security everywhere. Rumors about students. Thorne spent hours in room 7 with the director. Overheard him say, the threshold is unstable. They've shut down that section, claiming electrical issues. Wong went in to check the circuits and came out white as a sheet. Wouldn't talk about what he saw. The final entry from September 17th was just one line. They're sealing room 7 tonight. Thorne says we need to reset the doorway. God help anyone who went through. The journal ended there. Emma sat back, trying to process what she'd read. Room 7, the same room where Maya and Daniel were last seen, the same room that had appeared trapezoidal in her measurements. She was returning the journal to its place when a photograph slipped from between the pages. A Polaroid showing a maintenance worker standing beside a painting of a doorway. The man looked anxious, pointing at something in the painting that wasn't quite visible in the faded image. Scrawled at the bottom, "It moved again. Different room on the other side today." "Finding everything all right, Miss Matthews?" Emma startled. Winters stood at the end of the aisle watching her. "Yes, thank you," she said, quickly pocketing the photograph. "Just fascinating how much history is captured in these records." "Indeed," Winters replied, his expression unreadable. "Director Hargrove asked me to inform you that Dr. Thorne is looking for you. Something about measuring room 7 for the centerpiece installation." Emma felt a chill at the coincidence. "Of course, I'll head up right away." As she left the archives, Emma could feel Winters watching her. She wondered if he knew about the missing logs, if he'd read the journal himself. The museum, suddenly, felt like a place of conspiracies rather than art, of hidden truths rather than beauty, and somewhere above her, in the West Wing, Dr. Thorne waited, in room 7, the room where 2 students had disappeared 16 years ago, where something, called the threshold, had become unstable, where a doorway in a painting had somehow moved. Emma arrived in room 7 to find it empty. Thorne had left a message with the security guard that he'd been called away unexpectedly and would reconvene with her tomorrow. The delay gave Emma an opportunity she couldn't ignore. "Marcos!" she called to a custodian polishing the marble floor nearby. "How long have you worked at the museum?" The older man straightened, leaning on his mop. 22 years next month, Miss Matthews." "So you were here during the 2009 Obscura Exhibition?" Something flickered across Marcos's weathered face. Caution, perhaps, or unease. "I was, though I don't much like remembering those days." Emma lowered her voice. "Because of the students who disappeared?" Marcos glanced around, ensuring they were alone. "We're not supposed to talk about that." "Museum policy. I understand, but I'm responsible for the exhibition's return, and I need to know what I'm dealing with." Marcos hesitated, then gestured for her to follow him into a supply closet. Inside, among cleaning products and equipment, he spoke in hushed tones. "Things happened during that exhibition that can't be explained. Not just the students. There were incidents." "What kind of incidents?" "Objects moving on their own, cold spots so intense they'd make your bones ache. Some of the night staff refused to enter the West Wing alone." He paused. "After the students vanished, I was cleaning in here, this very room, when I heard whispering coming from the walls. Words I couldn't understand, but they sounded like they were calling to me." Emma thought of the journal entry about room 7's changing dimensions. "Did you ever notice anything strange about this room specifically? The shape, the measurements?" Marcos looked surprised. "You've noticed it too? We used to joke that the room was breathing. Some days it felt bigger, others smaller. Management said it was just the lighting playing tricks, but..." He tapped his temple. "We know what we saw." "What about Dr. Thorne?" Marcos's expression darkened. "He was always here after hours, making adjustments to that painting, the Doorway 1. I caught him once standing in front of it, just staring, not moving, barely breathing. When I asked if he needed anything, he turned around with this look on his face." Marcos shuddered. Like he wasn't fully here. Like part of him was somewhere else. A soft knock interrupted them. The door opened to reveal Leslie Park, a junior curator Emma had hired shortly after her arrival. "Sorry to disturb you," Leslie said, eyeing them curiously, "but you have a visitor in your office, Emma. A detective." Emma thanked Marcos, who returned to his work with visible relief. As she walked with Leslie through the galleries, she noticed her colleague's uncharacteristic silence. "Is everything all right, Leslie?" The younger woman hesitated. "I overheard you talking about the Obscura Exhibition. My aunt was a docent here in 2009. Her voice dropped. "She quit after what happened with those students." Said she saw something the day they disappeared. Emma stopped walking. What did she see? She was leading a tour when they passed room 7. The door was ajar, and she glanced inside. She said she saw one of the students, the girl, Maya, standing in front of the painting of the doorway, but something was wrong with her. She appeared to be flickering like a bad television signal, half there, half not. Leslie swallowed hard. My aunt reported it to security, but they dismissed it, said she was mistaken. A week later, she resigned. They reached Emma's office. Through the glass door, she could see Detective Rivera waiting, a file folder in his hands. "There's one more thing," Leslie said, gripping Emma's arm. "The night guards have been talking. Since the exhibition crates arrived, they've heard the whispering too, coming from the storage rooms." "What are they whispering about?" Leslie's eyes met Emma's, filled with apprehension. "Names. They're whispering names, and one of the guards claims he heard your name among them." Beyond the door, Rivera had spotted them, his expression grave as he stood to greet Emma. 2 investigations were about to converge: his 16-year search for answers and her rapidly unfolding discovery of the museum's secrets. "Be careful with the detective," Leslie whispered urgently, "and be careful in room 7. The staff say that something came through during the last exhibition. Something that never left." Emma squared her shoulders and opened her office door, greeted by Rivera's weathered face and knowing eyes. The time for whispers was ending. The truth, however impossible, was about to speak. Detective Rivera spread 16 years of evidence across Emma's desk: photographs, transcripts, diagrams. His weathered hands moved with practiced precision, arranging the pieces of a puzzle that had consumed nearly half his career. "I've interviewed 215 people connected to the disappearance," he said, voice rough from years of late nights and dead ends. But the museum's staff were the least forthcoming, always felt like they were holding something back. Emma studied a floor plan of the West Wing, marked with Rivera's handwritten notes. "This section," she said, pointing to an area adjacent to room 7. "It's not on our current blueprints." Rivera nodded grimly. "That's what brought me here today. The anonymous tip led me to a storage facility containing architectural plans from the 1940s. They show a small wing that was supposedly sealed during renovations in 1978. Emma compared the old plans to the museum's current layout. But these rooms would still physically exist. They'd just be walled off, inaccessible. Exactly. And I think there might be access points that weren't completely sealed. Rivera pulled out photos of the viewing port Emma had discovered days earlier. Like this. Emma's breath caught. "How did you get these?" "Museum security isn't as tight as they think. Point is, these viewing ports connect to something—" "A service corridor," Emma finished. "I saw it when I looked through. But why hide an entire section of the museum?" Their conversation was interrupted by Emma's phone. A text from Dr. Thorne, requesting her presence in the conservation lab immediately. Something about unexpected reactivity in one of the Obscura pieces. "Come with me," Emma told Rivera. "I think it's time you met Dr. Thorne." They navigated the museum's labyrinthine back corridors, Emma leading them on a route that passed through the oldest section of the building. "The viewing port I found," Emma said quietly as they walked. "It's positioned to observe room 7 specifically, and I've found records suggesting the room itself changes somehow, shifts its dimensions." Rivera nodded. The students' classmates reported feeling disoriented in that room, like the walls were moving. Museum claimed it was an intentional effect of the exhibition. They passed a maintenance door that Emma had never noticed before, The lock was new, but the door itself was ancient, its paint cracked with age. "Wait," she said, stopping abruptly. According to Rivera's floor plan, this door would lead to part of the sealed wing. She tried the handle, locked. Rivera examined the door. Modern keycard system on a door this old? Someone doesn't want people wandering in accidentally. Emma removed her keycard. As head curator, she had access to most areas of the museum. The light on the lock flashed red when she swiped. "Worth a try," Rivera said, but Emma wasn't listening. She was staring at a tiny symbol etched into the doorframe, a stylized threshold identical to the Obscura Exhibition's logo. "These doors," she murmured, "they're all connected to the exhibition somehow." Before Rivera could respond, a voice echoed down the corridor. "Ms. Matthews, detective, what a fortuitous encounter." Dr. Thorne approached, his tall frame casting a long shadow in the dim lighting. He smiled thinly, eyes darting to the locked door. "Exploring our architectural history?" he asked, his tone pleasant but eyes sharp with warning. "Just taking a shortcut to the conservation lab," Emma replied smoothly. "Detective Rivera is consulting on security for the exhibition." Thorne's gaze lingered on Rivera. "Ah, yes, the detective with the persistent interest in our museum. I've heard of your dedication." Rivera met Thorne's stare without flinching. 16 years isn't long when you're seeking the right answers." "Indeed," Thorne gestured down the corridor. "I was actually coming to find you, Ms. Matthews. We've had a development with one of the threshold pieces. It's awakened earlier than anticipated." "Awakened?" Emma questioned. Poor choice of words. Activated would be more precise. Art responding to its environment, you understand. As they followed Thorne, Rivera whispered to Emma, "That door, did you notice the floor beneath it?" Emma nodded imperceptibly. Fresh caulking sealed the gap between the door and the floor, recently applied. In the conservation lab, a small painting awaited. Abstract yet unmistakably depicting a doorway, though unlike the one from the previous exhibition. Its surface seemed to shift subtly, colors flowing like oil on water. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Thorne remarked. "This is just a preliminary piece, of course. The true threshold arrives tomorrow." Emma felt Rivera tense beside her. Outside museum hours, behind locked doors, something was being set in motion, a process that had claimed 2 lives 16 years ago and now threatened to resume. "The sealed wing," Emma said with sudden certainty. "That's where the exhibition is really going, isn't it? Not the West Wing. These renovations, the preparations, they're all for show." Thorne's smile remained, but his eyes hardened. "You're more perceptive than your predecessors, Ms. Matthews. That could be valuable, or problematic." The museum had closed hours ago, but light still spilled from the archives, where Emma and Rivera hunched over fragile documents. After their encounter with Thorne, they'd retreated here to investigate the museum's founder, Harrison Blackwood, the original collector whose acquisitions formed the institution's core. Blackwood traveled extensively in the 1920s, Emma explained, carefully turning the pages of his personal journal. Europe, Asia, South America, always seeking transformative art, as he called it. "Transformative how?" Rivera asked, scanning. "A collection of yellowed correspondence. He believed certain artworks could alter reality, not just represent it." Emma pointed to a passage in the journal. "Here, he writes about a temple in Cambodia, where paintings supposedly served as portals to other realms. He calls them thresholds of perception." Rivera paused over a photograph of Blackwood standing before a massive doorway, carved with intricate symbols. "Same term Thorne used." "Exactly, and look at this." Emma pulled out architectural plans dated 1932, the museum's original design. Blackwood insisted on specific room dimensions, precise angles. The architect's notes mention acoustic and optical requirements beyond standard practice. He built the museum to house these portal artworks, Rivera concluded, not just display them, activate them. Emma nodded, connecting the pieces. The sealed wing must have been designed for the most powerful pieces, the ones, too, dangerous for public viewing. A letter caught Rivera's attention, correspondence between Blackwood and a physicist named Emilia Voss. Listen to this. Your theories on interdimensional thresholds align with my experiences. The artwork doesn't merely represent the doorway. Under proper conditions, it manifests one. I've acquired pieces that demonstrate this property and require your expertise to stabilize the passages. Emma's blood chilled. Professor Eleanor Voss, who led the students' field trip in 2009, could she be related? Rivera made a note. Worth investigating. Blackwood believed these artworks were actual doorways to somewhere else, and he was collecting them. Not just collecting, Emma said, uncovering a museum acquisition ledger, creating them. He commissioned artists to produce works according to his specifications. She pointed to entries spanning decades, each describing pieces with terminology similar to the Obscura Exhibition. Rivera leaned back, processing the implications. So Blackwood builds a museum specifically designed to activate artwork that creates portals to other dimensions. Eventually dies, but his collection remains. Then, 16 years ago, the Obscura Exhibition comes through, featuring similar works, and two students vanish in front of a painting called The Threshold. And now it's returning, Emma finished. But why now? Why wait 16 years? The answer emerged from Rivera's stack of documents. A faded newspaper clipping reporting Blackwood's death in 1959. The obituary mentioned his unfulfilled vision and a 60-year trust established to continue his work. Emma quickly calculated. 60 years from 1959. 2019, Rivera said. 5 years ago, the trust would have matured, releasing funds and possibly artifacts held in reserve. Which explains why the exhibition disappeared for 16 years. They were waiting, preparing. Emma's voice dropped. But what happens when a doorway opens? Where does it lead? Rivera slid across another document, a page torn from Blackwood's journal, with a crude drawing of a human figure half dissolved into a painted doorway. The handwritten note beside it was chilling. Subject partially. Transitioned. Retrieval unsuccessful. Threshold remains unstable. Emma stared at the drawing, recognition dawning. The maintenance worker's journal mentioned Thorne saying, "The threshold is unstable," after the students disappeared. They didn't just vanish, Rivera said grimly. They went through. The implications settled over them like a shroud. 2. Young artists hadn't been abducted or killed. They'd been transported somewhere beyond ordinary reality through a doorway disguised as art. If the threshold was unstable, Emma reasoned, her academic mind still searching for logic, then perhaps they couldn't return. Or perhaps Blackwood's stabilization efforts were meant to make the passages permanent, to allow return journeys. Rivera gathered the documents, his detective's instincts crystallizing into certainty. The exhibition returns tomorrow. The true threshold arrives, according to Thorne. Whatever Blackwood started 60 years ago is reaching its culmination. Emma looked at her watch. Past midnight. In less than 8 hours, the final Obscura pieces would arrive. Whatever doorway had claimed Maya and Daniel was about to reopen. "We need to get into that sealed wing," she said, gathering her notes. "Tonight." The security keycard Rivera had borrowed from a distracted guard gave them access to the conservation lab, but not the sealed wing. After their research in the archives, Emma had remembered something. The small painting Thorne had shown them earlier, the one he'd said had awakened. If these artworks really are doorways, Emma whispered as they navigated the darkened corridors, then studying one up close might reveal how they function. The conservation lab was eerily silent, bathed in the blue glow of security lights. The painting sat on an easel in the center of the room, covered with a cloth. Emma approached it cautiously, as if it might spring to life at any moment. "Careful!" Rivera warned, positioning himself between Emma and the door. Emma slowly removed the cloth. The painting, a seemingly abstract arrangement of colors forming a vague doorway shape, looked different than it had hours earlier. The pigments had shifted, colors bleeding into one another in ways that defied physical explanation. "It's moving," she breathed, leaning closer. The surface rippled subtly, like water disturbed by an unseen current. As Emma watched, the colors coalesced into more definite shapes, suggestions of a room beyond the frame, shadows moving within it. "This isn't paint," she realized, examining the canvas edges. "At least, not entirely. There's something else mixed in. Something—" She hesitated, scientific vocabulary failing in the face of what she was witnessing. "Something alive?" Rivera leaned in, his skepticism battling with the evidence before him. "You're saying the painting itself is alive?" "Not exactly, but it's changing, responding. Look." She pointed to where the colors were continuing to shift, the suggestion of the doorway becoming more defined with each passing moment. Rivera pulled out his phone, recording the phenomenon. As he did, the movement in the painting accelerated, as if reacting to the electronic device. "It's sensitive to technology," Emma observed. "That might explain the anomalies in the security footage when Maya and Daniel disappeared." Carefully, Emma reached toward the canvas, her conservator's instincts overriding caution. Her fingertips hovered just above the surface, feeling a slight vibration, almost a hum. "Don't touch it," Rivera warned, but Emma was already withdrawing her hand. "There's energy coming from it, like static electricity, but more, directed." She reached for a specialized camera used in art authentication, designed to reveal underlying layers of paint. "Let's see what's really in there." The camera's screen showed something astounding. Beneath the visible painting lay a complex pattern of symbols, similar to those in the photograph of Blackwood, standing before the ancient doorway. But these symbols weren't painted. They were woven into the canvas itself. The canvas is the key, Emma realized, not just the paint. The material itself is prepared somehow, treated to become receptive to. She struggled to find rational terminology, to whatever force creates these thresholds. Rivera's phone chimed softly, an alert from the search algorithm he'd been running on Blackwood's personal records. He scanned the results, his expression darkening. "Blackwood didn't just collect art," he said grimly. "He collected artists. Look at this list." He showed Emma a document detailing stipends paid to dozens of artists over decades. He'd identify people with perception beyond ordinary boundaries and bring them here, fund their work. Emma scanned the names, stomach tightening when she recognized one. Gregory Chen, Maya's grandfather. She inherited his cameras. Blackwood believed certain people could perceive these doorways naturally, Rivera continued. He sought them out, cultivated their abilities. A sudden movement from the painting drew their attention. The doorway at its center had solidified, and within it a shadowy figure now stood, indistinct but unmistakably human in form. Emma's breath caught. The figure seemed to be looking out from the canvas, becoming clearer as they watched. It raised a hand, pressing against the painting's surface from the inside. "My God," Rivera whispered. The canvas bulged outward slightly, where the figure touched it, as if a membrane separated their reality from whatever existed on the other side. For a moment, the features became clearer, a young woman with a familiar face that sent ice through Emma's veins. "It's her," Rivera said, voice cracking. "It's Maya Chen." The image flickered, then receded, the painting returning to its abstract state. But the message was unmistakable. Maya still existed somewhere beyond the threshold, trapped in whatever dimension the painting connected to. And tomorrow, the true threshold would arrive. The masterpiece of Blackwood's collection, powerful enough to open a doorway that could be stepped through completely. "We need to get into that sealed wing now," Emma said, already moving toward the door, before Thorne completes whatever Blackwood started. The night security guard, Walter Collins, was exactly where Rivera's notes said he would be, nursing a coffee at an all-night diner 3 blocks from the museum. 67 years old, stooped but still sharp-eyed, Collins had been on duty the night Maya and Daniel disappeared. He'd also been the first person to refuse to speak with Rivera 16 years ago. Emma slid into the booth across from him while Rivera hung back, watching from the counter. They'd agreed her approach might yield better results than a detective who'd been hounding the man for years. "Mr. Collins?" Emma extended her hand. "I'm Emma Matthews, the new curator at—" "I know who you are," Collins interrupted, not taking her hand. "Museum staff talks. You've been asking questions about the Obscura Exhibition." His eyes narrowed. "And you brought him." He nodded toward Rivera. Emma didn't deny it. "We found something in the conservation lab tonight. Something impossible." She leaned forward. "We saw Maya Chen inside one of the paintings." Colin's coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. For a moment he seemed to age another decade before Emma's eyes. He set the cup down with a trembling hand. "Took longer than I expected," he said finally, his voice barely audible over the diner's ambient noise, "for one of them to make contact." "You've seen this before," Emma said. It wasn't a question. Collins nodded slowly. "Not just seen it. Heard it. They whisper from the paintings at night, when no one's supposed to be listening. Names, fragments of conversations." He glanced around nervously. "They want to come back. Why haven't you told anyone?" A bitter laugh escaped him. "I tried. Reported it to my supervisor the first time. Next day, Director Hargrove calls me in, reminds me of my non-disclosure agreement, offers early retirement with full benefits if I seek help for my stress-related hallucinations." His mouth twisted. "I have grandkids in college. Couldn't afford to lose that pension." Rivera approached then, sliding into the booth beside Emma. "But you kept records," he said, not introducing himself. "Notes in the maintenance logs that disappeared from the archives. A journal that mentioned the missing ones." Collins's eyes widened in recognition. "You found Joseph's journal? I thought they destroyed it." He shook his head. "Joseph was the only other one who believed me. He helped seal room 7 after what happened." "What exactly did happen?" Emma pressed. "We know about the threshold, the doorway. But how did Maya and Daniel go through?" Collins looked pained. "It wasn't just them. There were others before. Visitors who stood too long in front of certain paintings, who felt dizzy and disappeared into restrooms, never to emerge. Always ruled as having left the museum unnoticed. But those 2 students..." He trailed off. "You saw something," Rivera stated flatly. Collins nodded, the dam of 16 years of silence finally breaking. "I was monitoring the security cameras, saw them in room 7, looking at that painting, the threshold." The girl took photos, then suddenly lowered her camera, staring at the painting like she was hypnotized. The boy reached for her, and then... "Then what?" Emma whispered. "The painting opened, not like a door swinging, but like reality tearing. They didn't walk through, they were pulled through. One moment they were there, the next they weren't." Collins's hands shook as he wrapped them around his coffee cup. "But that's not the worst part." Rivera leaned forward. "What is?" Thorne was watching on another monitor, He wasn't surprised. He was taking notes. Collins's voice hardened. It was an experiment. Those kids were part of an experiment. And now they're bringing back the exhibition, Emma said, creating more thresholds. Colin's eyes met hers, filled with dread. Not creating, stabilizing. That's what Thorne said that night when he thought no one was listening. He was on the phone with someone, said the initial passage was successful, but unstable. Collins lowered his voice. He said they needed more time to secure the anchors on both sides. Both sides, Rivera repeated. Someone's been working from the other side of these thresholds. The sealed wing, Emma realized. That's where the anchors must be, devices or artworks that stabilize the connections. Collins reached into his pocket, extracting a worn keycard. Maintenance access won't get you everywhere, but it'll get you to the service corridor behind room 7. His eyes were solemn. If you're really going in there, you should know. I've heard Maya's voice in the whispers. She's been saying the same thing for 16 years. What? Emma asked. Don't let them open the final door. Over and over. Don't let them open the final door. Collins's maintenance keycard granted Emma and Rivera access to a service entrance near the museum's loading dock. The pre-dawn air was sharp with approaching autumn as they slipped inside, guided only by the glow of Rivera's pen light. The service corridor should connect to the main building through a tunnel system, Emma whispered, consulting the original architectural plans they'd photographed in the archives. Rivera nodded, checking his watch. We have 3 hours before the first staff arrives, less if Thorne is coming early for the final delivery. The service entrance led to a narrow utility corridor lined with pipes and electrical conduits. At its end, a metal staircase descended into darkness. Emma felt a subtle change in air pressure as they moved downward, the weight of history pressing in around them. The museum was built over the foundation of an earlier structure, she explained. Blackwood specifically chose this location. These tunnels might predate the museum itself. 3 levels below the museum, they reached a junction where the modern utility tunnel intersected with an older brick passage. The air was cooler here, with a mineral scent suggesting proximity to the water table. Rivera's light revealed a symbol carved into the keystone above the passage, the now familiar threshold mark. Blackwood's work extends deeper than we thought, Emma murmured, running her fingers over the worn carving. The brick tunnel branched repeatedly, forming a labyrinth beneath the museum. Emma navigated using the architectural plans, but gaps in the documentation left them relying on intuition at several junctions. Eventually, they reached a circular chamber where 7 tunnels converged. At the center stood a pedestal bearing a scale model of the museum. Rivera shone his light on the model, revealing a remarkable detail. Tiny representations of paintings hung on miniature walls, each marked with the threshold symbol. It's a map, Emma realized, examining the precisely crafted replica. Not just of the museum's architecture, but of the artwork placement. She pointed to 7 specific locations. These must be the anchor points Thorne mentioned, places where the thresholds are strongest. Rivera studied the pattern they formed. They create a perfect heptagram when connected, a 7-pointed star with the sealed wing at its center. Emma's academic mind raced through possibilities. Sacred geometry. The number 7 appears repeatedly in mystical traditions surrounding gateways between worlds. This isn't about art, Rivera said grimly. It's about opening a permanent passage to wherever Maya and Daniel were taken. Emma noticed something else. Small crystals embedded in the model at each threshold location, connected by fine silver wires that converged at the center of the sealed wing. It's a circuit, she breathed. The paintings aren't just portals. They're components in a larger system. Each threshold generates energy that flows to a central point. Rivera touched one of the miniature paintings, finding it unnervingly warm. They're already active. A distant sound echoed through the tunnels, the mechanical rumble of the service elevator activating. "Someone's coming," Rivera whispered, killing his light. In the sudden darkness, Emma noticed a faint luminescence emanating from the model. The tiny crystals were glowing, pulsing in a synchronized rhythm. "We need to get to the sealed wing before they complete the circuit," she said urgently. According to the model, the nearest access point was 2 levels up, behind the wall of room 7, exactly where Collins had directed them. They moved quickly through the tunnels, the sound of voices growing louder as they ascended. Near the top, they passed a storage room filled with crates bearing shipping labels from cities worldwide, locations where the Obscura Exhibition had traveled. Rivera paused to examine one that had been opened. Inside lay specialized equipment, measuring devices, optical instruments, and what appeared to be custom-built cameras. "Collection devices," Emma said, recognizing the technology from Blackwood's notes, "for capturing and transferring threshold energy. They've been harvesting power from each exhibition site," Rivera realized, "building towards something bigger." They reached a door marked with both the threshold symbol and modern biometric security. Beyond it lay the service corridor that would give them access to room 7 and presumably the sealed wing. Emma hesitated, hand on the door. "If we're right about this network, opening the final threshold won't just create another portal. It'll connect all of them," Rivera finished, "a permanent bridge between dimensions." Through the door, they could hear Thorne's voice directing the installation team as the museum awakened around them. The final threshold was arriving, the underground circuit was activating, and whatever lay on the other side would soon have a direct path into their world. Emma swiped Collins's keycard, holding her breath as the lock blinked from red to green. Whatever waited in the sealed wing couldn't remain hidden any longer. The service corridor behind room 7 was barely wide enough for a single person. Emma and Rivera edged along it, careful not to disturb the tools and equipment stacked against the walls. The passageway ended at a panel that, according to Collins's instructions, would open into the sealed wing. Emma pressed her ear against the wall. Silence. She nodded to Rivera, who helped her slide the panel aside just enough to peer through. The space beyond stole her breath. A perfect octagonal room, its walls lined with paintings. Dozens of them hung floor to ceiling. Unlike the public galleries with their controlled lighting and minimalist presentation, this room felt like a laboratory. Instruments surrounded each painting, measuring devices connected to a central console where data scrolled across multiple screens. "Clear," she whispered, and they slipped into the room, easing the panel closed behind them. Rivera moved immediately to the center console, while Emma approached the nearest painting. It resembled the threshold from the security footage. A doorway rendered with unsettling realism, but this one was larger, its surface rippling subtly, like the painting in the conservation lab. "These readings," Rivera said quietly, examining the console. "Temperature fluctuations, electromagnetic spikes, radiation levels I've never seen before." Emma's attention was fixed on the paintings. Each depicted a doorway or portal of some kind, but as she moved closer, she noticed something that made her blood freeze. Within each painting, partially obscured by shadow or architectural elements, were faces. Human faces, watching from beyond the thresholds. "Rivera," she called softly, "look at this." He joined her, following her gaze from painting to painting. The faces were diverse. Men, women, children of various ethnicities and apparent time periods, some dressed in clothing styles from decades or centuries past. "All the missing," Rivera breathed, "not just Maya and Daniel." Emma approached one, painting where a young woman's face was clearer than the others. She wore clothing reminiscent of the 1950s, her expression a mixture of confusion and resignation. Blackwood didn't just theorize about these thresholds, Emma said. He created them, used them. These people crossed over, intentionally or not. Rivera was checking dates on the ornate frames. Some of these paintings date back to the museum's founding. Blackwood has been collecting people for decades. Emma's academic mind struggled to process the implications. But why? What happens to those who cross through? The answer came from an unexpected source, a soft hum emanating from the paintings themselves. As if responding to their presence, the faces in the artworks became more distinct, pressing closer to the surfaces. The hum resolved into whispers, dozens of voices speaking simultaneously in a disjointed chorus. "Help us. We're still here. Don't let them complete the circle." Emma moved from painting to painting, the voices growing more distinct with each step. She paused before a large canvas where Maya Chen's face was clearly visible, her hands pressed against the inside of the painting as if against a window. "Emma Matthews," Maya's voice came clearly through the canvas, "you need to destroy the anchors before the final threshold arrives." Rivera stood transfixed. "You can hear her?" Emma nodded, unable to tear her eyes from Maya's desperate expression. "The anchors, they're the devices connected to each painting. They're keeping these people trapped between dimensions." Maya's voice continued urgently. "Thorne doesn't just want to open doors, he wants to collapse the barriers completely, merge our reality with this one." "What is this place?" Emma asked, pressing her palm against the canvas, mirroring Maya's position. "A shadow dimension," Maya replied, her voice fading in and out like a bad radio signal. "We exist as reflections here, caught between states. But there are others deeper in, entities that were never human. They're what Blackwood was trying to reach, what Thorne serves." A low vibration began to pulse through the room, causing the instruments to flicker and the paintings to shudder in their frames. Maya's expression turned to panic. "It's starting," she said. "The final threshold is being positioned. You have to destroy the central anchor in this room. It controls the entire network." Emma scanned the space, eyes landing on a crystalline structure at the room's center, identical to the one in the underground model, but much larger, its facets already beginning to glow with an inner light. "Daniel!" Maya called, and another face appeared beside hers in the painting, Daniel Whitaker, older but recognizable. "Show them how to break the circuit." Rivera checked his watch. "The museum opens in 30 minutes. If Thorne has the final piece, he does." A new voice interrupted. Emma and Rivera turned to find Director Hargrove standing in the doorway, a security team behind him. "And I'm afraid you've just complicated our 16-year project considerably." Director Hargrove straightened his bespoke suit as he stepped fully into the room, security personnel flanking him. His patrician features, usually arranged in a mask of cultured benevolence, now displayed naked ambition. "Ms. Matthews," he said, "you've exceeded my expectations. Most curators never discover this chamber, let alone grasp its significance." Emma positioned herself between Hargrove and the central crystal. "You've known about this all along. The disappearances, the trapped souls, you've been perpetuating Blackwood's work." "Perpetuating?" "My dear, I've perfected it." Hargrove gestured around the room. Harrison was a visionary, but limited by the technology of his time. We've spent decades refining his methods, preparing for this convergence. Rivera moved subtly toward the door, assessing the security team. 4 guards, all armed. "You won't get away with this. People know we're here." Hargrove smiled thinly. "Detective Rivera, 16 years of investigation, and you arrived just in time to witness the culmination. Poetic, really. Behind them, the faces in the paintings had withdrawn into the shadows, but their whispers persisted, a desperate chorus warning of what was to come. "Why?" Emma demanded. "Why trap these people? What do you gain from merging dimensions?" Something shifted in Hargrove's expression, a flicker of religious fervor. "Evolution, Ms. Matthews. Humanity has reached its limits in this reality. The entities beyond the threshold offer transcendence, new forms of consciousness, new physical laws to exploit." "And the price?" Emma challenged. "How many more people must be sacrificed?" "Sacrificed?" Hargrove seemed genuinely perplexed. "They're pioneers, not victims, the first colonists of a new frontier." A commotion from the corridor interrupted them, the sound of heavy equipment being moved, followed by Thorne's precise tones directing the installation team. The final threshold was arriving. "You have a remarkable opportunity, Ms. Matthews," Hargrove continued, lowering his voice. "Your expertise, your intuitive understanding of the thresholds. You could be instrumental in what comes next. A curator not just of art, but of reality itself." Emma felt a chill at the naked manipulation, yet also the nauseating pull of intellectual curiosity. Part of her, the academic, the researcher, wanted to understand this phenomenon, to witness the impossible. Maya's voice cut through her thoughts, faint but clear from the nearest painting. "Emma, don't listen. They offered me the same choice. The entities consume consciousness. They feed on it." Hargrove's expression hardened. "The transition requires guides, humans who understand both sides. You're perfect for this role." Emma's mind raced, calculating, options buying time. "Show me the final threshold first. If I'm to make this choice, I deserve to see what I'd be curating." Rivera caught her eye, a silent message passing between them. He had positioned himself near the control panel, hand casually resting beside an emergency alarm. Hargrove hesitated, then nodded. "A reasonable request from a curator. Follow me." As they moved toward the door, Emma felt the vibrations intensify, the crystal behind her pulsing faster, the paintings trembling in their frames. The whispers from the trapped souls grew more frantic. In the corridor, a massive crate was being carefully maneuvered toward room 7. Thorne supervised, his tall figure radiating tension. When he saw Emma, his eyes narrowed. "She knows everything," Hargrove informed him. "I've offered her a position with us." Thorne studied Emma. "And her decision?" "Pending," Hargrove replied. "She wants to see the masterpiece first." "Understandable," Thorne said, though suspicion lingered in his gaze. "It is, after all, the culmination of her field." The crate was positioned in room 7, installation specialists carefully removing its protective coverings. As the final layer was lifted, Emma caught her breath. The painting was massive, 8 feet tall, its surface shifting like liquid metal. Unlike the other thresholds, this one depicted not a simple doorway, but an immense portal, grand and terrible. Within it swirled shapes that defied comprehension, suggesting vastness beyond human perception. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Thorne whispered, watching Emma's face. "The final threshold, painted by Blackwood himself using pigments derived from materials, found only in the shadow dimension." Emma felt a pull from the painting, not physical, but mental, a siren call to her consciousness. The room seemed to tilt around her, reality bending in the presence of the threshold. "Your decision, Ms. Matthews?" Hargrove prompted, watching her reaction closely. "Join us in curating the new reality, or—" The unspoken alternative hung in the air between them. Behind her, Rivera waited for her signal, his hand poised near the alarm. In the sealed wing, the faces in the paintings pressed forward, silently pleading. The moment of choice had arrived. The moment extended, like a thread pulled taut about to snap. Emma felt every eye on her. Hargrove's expectant gaze, Thorne's calculating stare, the silent plea from Rivera, and the desperate faces in the paintings. The final threshold pulsed before her, a masterpiece of horror and beauty intertwined. "I need to understand the process fully," Emma said, her voice steadier than she felt. "If I'm to be part of this, show me exactly how it works." Relief flickered across Hargrove's face. Of course, a curator should understand her exhibition. He nodded to Thorne. "Show her the chamber." Thorne hesitated, then gestured for Emma to follow him deeper into the sealed wing. Rivera moved to accompany them, but a security guard blocked his path. "Only the curator," Thorne instructed. Emma gave Rivera a meaningful look, a silent plea for patience. "I'll be fine," she assured him, though her heart hammered against her ribs. Thorne led her through a corridor lined with more threshold paintings, each containing shadowed figures pressing against their canvas prisons. At the corridor's end stood an ancient door marked with symbols matching those from Blackwood's journals. "The ritual chamber," Thorne explained, producing an ornate key. "The heart of Blackwood's vision." The door swung open to reveal an octagonal room similar to the one they discovered earlier, but vastly older. While the museum above was barely a century old, this chamber felt ancient, its stone walls weathered by time, floor worn smooth by countless footsteps. At its center stood a stone altar surrounded by 7 pedestals arranged in a perfect circle. "This chamber predates the museum by centuries," Thorne said, pride evident in his voice. "Blackwood didn't build over this site by accident. The location has always been a natural weak point between dimensions." Emma circled the room slowly, taking in its details. The walls were covered with intricate carvings depicting human figures passing through doorways, their expressions transforming from terror to rapture. Above the altar, a circular opening in the ceiling aligned perfectly with the museum's central dome. "The pedestals," Emma observed, "they're the anchor points for the 7 threshold paintings." Thorne nodded, watching her closely. 6 are already in place throughout the museum. "The final threshold completes the circuit." Emma gestured to the altar. "And this? The focal point, where reality will bend most significantly." Thorne's voice took on a reverent quality. "Where the chosen will facilitate the merging of dimensions." "The chosen," Emma repeated. "You mean me, someone with the right perception?" "Yes. You've demonstrated remarkable sensitivity to the thresholds." His eyes glittered in the dim light. "Few can hear the voices from the other side as clearly as you do." Emma's mind raced behind her carefully composed expression. She could feel the weight of the chamber pressing down, centuries of hidden rituals permeating the stone. "The previous exhibitions," she said, "they were tests, measuring threshold strength at different locations around the world." Thorne smiled thinly. "Gathering energy, calibrating the network. The disappearances were unfortunate but necessary sacrifices. And today, the culmination. When the final threshold is positioned in room 7, all 7 paintings will align with these pedestals." He gestured to chalk markings on the floor, lines connecting the pedestals to the altar. "The network will activate fully, and the barriers between dimensions will dissolve." Emma approached the altar, noting ancient stains darkening the stone. "And my role in this?" Thorne's voice dropped to a near whisper. "You will be the bridge, Ms. Matthews. Your consciousness, anchored in this reality but receptive to the other, will guide the entities across." "Like a human threshold," Emma concluded finally, "understanding the horror of what they planned." "Precisely." Thorne checked his watch. "We should return. The alignment must occur precisely at noon." As they turned to leave, Emma noticed something carved into the altar's side, a series of symbols with one scratched out and rewritten. Recognition flashed through her mind, the same correction she'd seen in Blackwood's journal, a crucial alteration to the ritual. "One last question," she said, memorizing the original symbol. "The entities, what do they offer in return for passage?" Thorn's expression shifted, a shadow passing across his features. Transcendence, freedom from physical limitations. He paused, something haunted entering his eyes. "At least, that's what they promised Blackwood." "And you believe them?" Thorn didn't answer, merely gesturing toward the door where Hargrove waited impatiently. The moment of decision was approaching. The final threshold would soon be positioned. The ritual chamber would align with the 7 paintings. And Emma would have to make her final choice. Emma's mind worked furiously as she followed Thorn back through the labyrinthine passages of the sealed wing. The altered symbol from the altar burned in her memory, a discrepancy that might be their only chance. She needed to communicate with Rivera, to formulate a plan before noon, now less than 40 minutes away. When they returned to room 7, chaos greeted them. Alarms blared throughout the museum, security personnel rushed past, and Hargrove was shouting into a phone. "What happened?" Thorn demanded. Hargrove's face was livid. "Someone triggered the fire alarm. The museum is evacuating." His gaze fell accusingly on Rivera, who stood calmly beside a broken glass case. "Public safety," Rivera said with professional detachment. "Strange electrical anomalies throughout the building. Could be dangerous." Emma understood immediately. Rivera had bought them time, forced a museum evacuation that would delay the ritual, but Hargrove was already countermanding the evacuation order for essential personnel. "The alignment proceeds as scheduled," he insisted. "Security, seal, all entrances to the West Wing. No one enters or leaves." As the room cleared, leaving only Hargrove, Thorn, and 2 guards with Emma and Rivera, a subtle vibration began to pulse through the floor. The final threshold, now fully uncrated and positioned against the wall, seemed to ripple in response. "It's starting," Thorn said, checking instruments attached to the painting's frame. "The thresholds are resonating even without proper alignment." Emma moved closer to Rivera. "I saw the ritual chamber," she whispered urgently. "Blackwood altered one of the symbols. I think he sabotaged his own ritual." Rivera's eyes widened slightly. "Why would he? He must have learned the truth about the entities. They don't offer transcendence. They consume consciousness." Their whispered exchange was interrupted by a new disturbance, the sound of breaking glass from the sealed wing. Hargrove motioned for the guards to investigate, leaving only Thorn to watch Emma and Rivera. "What was that?" Emma asked, though she already suspected the answer. Thorn's face was tight with tension. "The other paintings, they're becoming unstable." As if in confirmation, a haunting wail echoed from the sealed wing, followed by a guard's shout cut suddenly short. Hargrove paled, backing toward the door. "Control it, Thorn," he ordered. "We're too close to fail now." But Thorn's attention was fixed on the final threshold, where the swirling patterns had begun to coalesce into a more defined shape, a massive doorway through which shadows moved with unsettling purpose. The moment of distraction was all Emma needed. She lunged toward the painting, Rivera moving simultaneously to intercept Thorn. But before either could reach their targets, the air split with the sound of shattering glass, not from one painting, but dozens. From the doorway to the sealed wing emerged figures, translucent at first, then solidifying with each step. Men and women in clothing from various eras, their expressions dazed but determined. Among them walked Maya Chen and Daniel Whitaker, 16 years older than when they disappeared, moving with the careful steps of people relearning how to exist in physical form. "The anchors," Maya said, her voice stronger now that she stood in the real world. "They shattered when the network destabilized." Hargrove backed away, horror etched on his face. "Impossible! The containment fields—" "Failed," Daniel finished, his artist's hands now scarred and worn, just like they did 16 years ago when Maya and I first crossed over. Emma stared in shock. You've been trying to return all this time? Maya nodded, fatigue evident in every line of her face. We're not the only ones. Hundreds have been trapped between dimensions since Blackwood began his experiments, some for nearly a century. Another figure stepped forward, an elderly man whose bearing suggested authority even in his disheveled state. I was Blackwood's assistant, he said, voice cracking from disuse. I learned what the entities truly wanted and sabotaged the ritual. For decades, we've been fighting from the other side, weakening the barriers around the anchors. Thorne had backed against the wall, scientific certainty crumbling in the face of this unexpected development. The ritual will not proceed, the old man stated firmly. I altered the symbols after Harrison realized his mistake. The entities cannot be controlled or bargained with. They are absence personified, voids that consume consciousness and reality itself. As more figures emerged from the sealed wing, survivors of Blackwood's experiments spanning decades, the final threshold began to pulse erratically. The doorway depicted in the painting widened, darkened, and through it came a shadow deeper than darkness itself. They're coming through anyway, Maya warned, her voice rising with urgency. The network is collapsing, but the final door is opening on its own. As chaos erupted in room 7, Hargrove slipped away, abandoning Thorne to face the returned victims. Alone, Emma noticed his retreat and nodded to Rivera, who immediately pursued the fleeing director through the service corridor. The survivors were gathering around the final threshold, forming a barrier between the painting and the rest of the room. Maya approached Emma, her movements still stiff, as if reacquainting herself with gravity. The entities cannot fully manifest unless the ritual is completed, Maya explained, but even this partial opening is dangerous. They can influence minds, corrupt matter. How do we close it? Emma asked. The symbol, said Blackwood's elderly assistant, who'd introduced himself as Edward Voss. The name struck Emma immediately. He must be related to Professor Eleanor Voss, who had led the field trip 16 years ago. You're Eleanor's father, Emma realized. She brought her students here knowing about the thresholds. Voss nodded grimly. I managed to send messages through from the other side. Eleanor understood the danger. She was trying to expose the truth, but underestimated how deeply the conspiracy reached. A commotion in the corridor interrupted them, raised voices, then the sound of a struggle. Rivera returned, forcibly guiding Hargrove and another man. Emma recognized as the museum's chief financial officer, Marshall Pierce. Found them in Hargrove's office destroying evidence, Rivera announced, displaying a stack of documents he'd managed to seize. Board meeting minutes going back decades. Emma quickly scanned the papers. They revealed a horrifying truth. The museum's board of trustees had been actively complicit in Blackwood's experiments from the beginning. Wealthy, influential members of society had funded his research in exchange for promises of extended life, enhanced consciousness, and power beyond human limitations. It was never just about art, Emma said. The full scope of the conspiracy becoming clear, the museum was a front for something much older. The Order of the Eternal Threshold, Voss confirmed, founded in 1887 but with roots in much older occult traditions. Blackwood was their most successful adept until he turned against them. Hargrove sneered despite his predicament. You think exposing the board will stop anything? They include some of the most powerful people in the world, judges, senators, corporate leaders. This goes beyond one museum. Pierce, more pragmatic, addressed Emma directly. Be reasonable, there are contingencies in place. Even if you prevent this opening, there are other threshold locations, other paintings. Not anymore, Daniel said, stepping forward with a tablet he'd taken from the control console. We've spent 16 years identifying and sabotaging anchors across the world. This was their last functional node. On the screen, alerts flashed from museums in Berlin, Tokyo, São Paulo, and a dozen other cities. Threshold paintings deactivating simultaneously as their imprisoned occupants escaped. Hargrove's composure finally cracked. "You fools! The entities will punish this betrayal. They've invested too much to be denied passage." As if in response, the final threshold pulsed violently. The painted doorway widened further, and through it reached something that resembled a hand, only in the most abstract sense, a distortion of space in the rough shape of elongated fingers. "The corrected symbol," Emma said urgently to Voss. "Where does it need to be placed?" The old man pointed to the stone floor beneath the painting. "The final anchor point. It must be inscribed there to reverse the polarity of the threshold." Maya was already searching for tools. "We need something to carve with." Rivera produced a pocket knife, but Emma hesitated, a curator's instinct making her examine the painting's frame first. There, hidden beneath layers of ornate carving, she found what she was looking for: Blackwood's original correction, concealed but preserved. "Here," she said, pointing to the almost invisible alteration. Blackwood hid the true symbol in plain sight, knowing the Order would try to reverse his sabotage. As Emma traced the symbol with her finger, the painting seemed to recoil, the reaching distortion withdrawing slightly. Voss's eyes widened in recognition. "Yes, that's it. The closing sigil." Beyond the threshold, shapes gathered in the darkness, entities sensing their opportunity slipping away. A deep vibration shook the room, plaster cracking along the walls as reality itself protested the strain. The museum's phone lines were lighting up, board members calling in, demanding updates, issuing threats. But their power was meaningless against the determination of those who had survived the shadow dimension and returned to prevent others from suffering the same fate. "We need to act now," Maya urged, her eyes fixed on the widening darkness beyond the threshold. "They're coming through."